Oh, wow.
Hey, everybody. Diego, you'll let people in as they come in?
Sure.
Excellent. And then, where's Ben?
I am here.
Excellent. All right. So great. We got a nice crowd here. Let's get moving. Thanks everybody for coming. As everybody has to say when we start a Zoom, we know you're sick of Zoom, but thank you for making time to come and listen to a really interesting perspective on really important stuff. So really appreciate you making the time. I'm Professor Matt Sinkowitz of the Communication and International Studies departments here at Boston College. And I want to get straight, again, Zoom time is precious and our eyeballs are getting tired. I want to get straight into the content. All I really want to do is note that about 4 years ago, we had Ben Dixon, a progressive podcaster, multimedia sensation, come to Boston College in person before the election, the night before, to sort of get us thinking about what was coming. And I remember the sort of event ending by, Ben saying, and we'll see what happens tomorrow, or the next day, whatever it was, and me being confident, I'm like, oh, we know what's going to. And then Ben, of course, was on to something that things were not nearly as certain as we might think. And then when I was talking to people about scheduling this year's talk, we said we got to get Ben back, but let's schedule him after the election. Let's make sure we're not making any assumptions or anything. Ben was smart enough not to presume, but some of us weren't. So just with that, I just want to note that Ben, our guest today, he has built himself up, from doing a little show in his own bedroom, sort of squeaking in after his regular day job, to now having hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, running multiple podcasts, video casts. Just sort of a true representative of the possibilities for somebody who wants to work hard, is smart, and can kind of be savvy about new media. So with that, let's give a round of applause here, muted or not, to Ben Dixon. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thank you, Professor Sinkowitz. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to your class in any format, and you're at Boston College. I was thinking earlier today about the last time I was here, and had things worked out differently, things would obviously have worked out differently. I want to start by saying Professor Sinkowitz mentioned that I'm a progressive podcaster / broadcaster / author, and I have a political persuasion. I don't hide it, not ashamed of it. I can, if you disagree with me, I want you to know that I can convince you. And that's my job. But I also want to put that at the beginning so that you can take everything that I say with a grain of salt, right? Filter it through your own lens of your own objectivism. Like you have an objective worldview. And I want you to understand mine from the outset so that you can filter it and take it with a grain of salt. That said, I don't really have an official title of what to talk about, except for how fragile our democracy is, and how dependent it is on consensus and agreements that aren't law. It's not codified. The peaceful transfer of power is not enshrined in law. It has been somewhat of what in 1776 they would have called a gentleman's agreement. Today, they would just say it's a norm. It is just something that's recognized. It's expected that there will be a peaceful transfer of power. You win, you win. You lose, you lose. In the year 2000, we had probably our biggest challenge to date, up until now, of that, because it wasn't clear who won. It legitimately was not clear, and it came down to some 500 votes in the state of Florida. I was living in Florida at the time, and I remember how tumultuous it was and how big of a question mark it really was. And so in context of media and what I do and the importance of media in this, it's the ability to build that consensus. It's both a bad thing as well as a good thing, right? The media has the ability to manufacture consent. It does. It's just a part of its function. It has the ability to say something over and over and over and over again until the masses either reluctantly agree, they might be persuaded, but it has the capacity to manufacture consent. And really, if you think about what's happening right now with the 2020 election, that's all we're hanging on. I mean, never mind the fact that the different secretaries of state, they are overseeing the elections in their states. And we can, whether they're Republican or Democrat, I think we have to extend some space and grace to them to believe that they're at least going to facilitate their job for the sake of their own reputation. Not out of any sense of nobility. They're not going to do good just because they want to do good for democracy, but for self-preservation. I think it's safe to assume that they're going to at least try to do an efficient job. Now, there's some margin of error there, greater or less extent. Some people might actually be doing it in good faith in terms of trying to be noble towards democracy, and other people might not do a good job. They might just do what serves their political interests. I don't know. That's the margin of error, but I can't assume that. I have to look at it and say, I believe that the secretaries of state and the election supervisors, particularly the election supervisors on the county by county level, all they can do is their job. The media has played a significant role in this over the years because the media has their own analysts. They have their own voter departments. They have their own departments that are able to process the numbers and based on the number of outstanding votes, determine whether or not that outstanding vote is a statistically significant enough number to change who's in the lead. And if it's not a big enough number to change who's in the lead, historically, every single media agency has been able to make that decision based on the data that they have, based on accepted parameters and accepted practices. They have been able to independently call an election. This perhaps is, the year 2000 notwithstanding, 2020 is perhaps the first time, or maybe the second time, depending on who you were watching in the year 2000, that the media is being completely disregarded because we don't like the outcome of it. Now, again, I told you at the beginning, I'm partisan, 100%. I'm not going to tell you my opinion on Donald Trump, but you could probably assume it, and I want you to assume it so that you can filter everything that I say through that lens and decide whether you want to hear what I say or not. That's totally cool, and that's fair. But it is the ability of the president of the United States to simply ignore those norms. Ignore the fact that every year, every election year up until this point, we have generally accepted an election result when multiple media outlets have made a decision based on standard procedure, standardized, not standard, but it is standardized across the industry, based on their own election departments who are looking at the amount of outstanding votes, looking at the various districts. I mean, it's not, no media company besides Breitbart will just call it an election. All right, there's my bias sneaking in there. They are going to actually use data. If, for example, if in case you don't know, this is the media outlet, they do this. They will look at Georgia and say, okay, there's 99% reporting, and we have Fulton County outstanding. Fulton County is outstanding. Let's look at the breakdown of registrations in Fulton County. Oh, the registrations in Fulton County is like 60% Democratic and 40% Republican. Well, at 99% reporting, this is the percentage of votes that are outstanding in this one county. It's majority Democrat. Last election, it went Democrat, it went to Hillary Clinton. They can make an educated, really based in science guess that this is going to be a place where we can call the election. That's kind of a really loose way of understanding the science behind what media companies do. But you know what? There's nothing in the law that says that Donald Trump has to recognize the media. It has been a quote unquote gentleman's agreement, the term that they would use in 1776. I'm not sure exactly what would be the modern, updated, and the correct version to say it today. But it's a norm. There you go. That's the word. It's a norm. It's something that presidents and politicians and their parties generally just recognize. But the ability to simply ignore something that you don't like, especially when it's not rooted in law, but it's just rooted in tradition, is shaping up rather to be the Achilles heel of American democracy. Because all Donald Trump has to say is, I don't care what the media says. I'm not accepting what the media says. And we find ourselves where we are today. What does that mean in terms of this conversation? What does that mean in terms of American democracy? It's that there's so many things that are just simply dependent on us agreeing that we are going to accept this. We're going to accept the media's capacity to process data the same way a supervisor of election will process data. And once we get confirmation from media outlets, multiple media outlets, we'll accept that. And that'll be a standardized norm for election night. In fact, Donald Trump himself accepted it. He said that, we generally know, okay, I'm not going to mock him. I'm not going to do my impersonation. I think it's pretty good, but I'm not going to do it here. We generally know who wins the election on election night. He said that multiple times, and he insisted that we're going to know who won on election night. Well, the only way you actually know who won on election night is not by the certified results from the Secretary of State on the state-by-state level. It's not by the certified electors who actually go and cast their vote to elect the president of the United States. All of those things happen in the background, which take days and weeks, months after election night. The only way you ever know who won on election night is by media outlets using their departments, their election departments, who are using standardized practices. All of them want to get it right. That is a night where they have to get it right. They don't want to be first. In fact, we saw this time around, nobody wanted to be first. Everybody was holding out. Everyone was holding out. And then finally, I think the AP jumped out there, or was it CBS? I forgot who was the first one to jump out there by Saturday. They gave it that many days. But the only way we can actually do what the president said do, which was generally we know who wins on election night, that's a function of the media. And when he, decided that he wasn't going to recognize those results, there was nothing in the law that said he has to. And so he doesn't have to recognize those results, which should help you understand exactly how tenuous democracy is, even just in this regard. Like there's at least three other immediate fault lines that we could discuss. One of them being the agreement to have a peaceful transfer of power. That's not in law. That's just an agreement. That's a norm. And if you decide to simply ignore those norms, then we have, I don't know if it's a constitutional crisis yet, but we definitely have a crisis of confidence. And that's where we are. And that's the importance of the media in what we do in understanding and creating, not only creating consensus, but informing the masses at a very critical juncture of American democracy. And the moment a president is like, I don't care what they have to say. Well, there's nothing in the law that says he has to, which really shows both the importance, but the woefully insufficiency of the role that media plays in our democracy. So that's all I have, Professor. I have a whole lot more, but we're on Zoom time and everybody's tired of staring at these screens. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that's great, Ben. Thanks for sort of just getting us rolling on this discussion. I'm going to take the prerogative to ask you the first question,
Okay.
but then my goal is to get out of the way entirely after that. So we'll have, I'll ask one question, and then if everybody can use their blue virtual hands and raise that to ask questions. So here's my lead question, really just to give everybody time to formulate theirs. I want to ask you a little bit about, there seems to be a bit of a double-edged sword kind of in what you're describing and in what you do. In that, you talked about Breitbart, you noted sort of the media's decreasing ability to create consensus at moments where it seems like, we need it for sort of crisis purposes. But it cuts both ways in that on the one hand, you have not worked up through the traditional media ladder. Right. You've got 100,000 YouTube subscribers. But you've done it all. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah. We just crossed that yesterday, by the way. So I'm still celebrating. So
we'll throw all those links in the chat too, so people can check it out. I mean, and this is something to celebrate when people who have interesting, unique perspectives who otherwise wouldn't get the shot. Right. But it does seem like that part of that, other side of that is where we get some of the problems that you're pointing to, right? There being this fracture. Not everybody's as who gets those 100,000 followers are as conscientious as you, responsible to the facts as you, and so on. So I wonder if you could just meditate on that for a minute as students raise their blue hands and get ready to ask you questions.
Yeah. So the problem is the problem and the solution, the good news and the bad news is all the same. It's the democratization of media. It's really the democratization of anything. The more accessible a thing is, the better chances you have of finding unique and gifted voices, which I like to think I am, right? But you also have voices that manipulate and twist it and capitalize on it, which other people think I am, right? You know, as genuine as I think I am, there are plenty of people out there who hate me with the fire of 10 suns. And they think that I'm a manipulative propagandist and that, you know, but then their platform, I will look at their platform and say, no, you are the manipulative propagandist. It becomes like a mudslinging competition. And then the only people who are left to decide is you, right? The viewer. You have to be the person who would look at the two different pieces of content. Both of us are going to say pretty much the same thing. Like, that person is lying to you. That person is a propagandist. That person means you harm. They want to lead you down the wrong road. Don't listen to that person. Listen to me. If everybody is saying that, then it really becomes critical that the individual consumer has the critical set of tools to make the decision on their own, which is why I try to my best to be different in this position. And this is something that you won't get on MSNBC. You won't get it on Fox News. You won't get it on any mainstream media because that's not their function. Their function is not to develop your critical skills to determine what is factual, what is opinion, what is subjective, what is objective. They don't do that. They're just there to transmit to you. They're not there to educate you. On my podcast and what I do my best to educate in the sense of, I actually tell my viewers on a regular basis, listen, I want you to outgrow me. I want you to question me. I want you to, you know, take what I say with a grain of salt, because what I'm really trying to equip people with is not just what I have to say for clicks. I really want people to be equipped with the skill set to maneuver through these media spaces on their own, right? Which means if I equip you correctly, then at some point you should be able to look at me and see what I'm doing wrong. And you should be like, no matter how much you like me, you know, you should be able to look at me with a critical lens and say, okay, Ben, I think one, I've outgrown you, but then two, I feel like, you know, that line that you said there, everything else that you said, I actually have people who do this. I enjoy the entire hour and a half of your podcast, but there was one line in there that I felt like you were being manipulative. And I'm like, okay, yes, I probably was, because I'm using the same skill set as the people that I think are propagandists. We have the same skill set. The real question is, what are we doing with it? One, I'm confessing to you at the beginning of every episode that I'm doing this with the lens. I'm doing this with a bias. I'm doing this because I believe X, Y, and Z. And by the time you get done with the podcast, my job is to convince you and persuade you. So yes, I am using the same skill set, but I'm just weaponizing it differently. And I hope that the way that I weaponize it is the means that will equip you to eventually outgrow me. That's not the function of mainstream media. I would say that's not the function of any media. I think I'm doing a specific job just using media as a way of doing it. I don't even really consider myself as being media as much as kind of a person of the people, a man of the people, and trying to equip you to help people navigate the propaganda that we're inundated with, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, thanks very much, Ben. So again, if you've got a question, just raise your blue hand. Mike, you've got a question.
Yeah, first off, thanks so much for coming back, Ben. Really appreciate it. Good to see you after 4 years.
Wow.
So I have two questions for you, I guess. And they're both simple versions, but I'll give you a longer-winded version of it. I'm curious where the two parties go from here. On one hand, with regard to the Republican Party, you know, if you think back to after 2008, when they were kind of cast off, they had this great rebranding effort that was called the Tea Party, where they suddenly discovered that they were fiscally conservative and they believed in limited government, all sorts of things that they had not shown to be under the Bush administration. So I'm curious what direction the rebranding of the Republican Party takes after this. And I'm also curious what direction the Democratic Party goes in, because I think in the best case scenario for them, there would have been a clear Senate majority that that Biden would have been able to pass legislation, at least for the first 2 years, perhaps before the House gets flipped again. And now, I mean, maybe they can get 2 seats in Georgia. I think that's probably a long shot. And so with Biden being so hamstrung even these first 2 years, what direction does the Democratic Party go in?
So I'm actually just looking at my Twitter timeline because I want to see how people responded to what I said about John Ossoff, the race in Georgia, because I don't like John Ossoff. You know, he's a Democrat running against David Perdue, but from my political lens, he has to win. He's representative of the problem of the Democratic Party in the sense that they're not doing what they need to do to galvanize the base enough to actually get significant wins. We got it in 2018 in the House, but we have to have it in the Senate. Why? Because we're dealing with a hyper-partisan, hyper-polarized America. I want to say something here to answer your question, to put an important caveat to your question, to my reply to your question. I don't believe that there's an equivalence between what the Democrats do and what the Republicans do. Now, this is my pure partisan lens. Take it with a grain of salt. Whatever your political ideology is, I'm admitting this is my political lens. I think that Republicans in this country have employed a scorched earth approach where they're not going to negotiate. They're not going to come to the table for any reason, because that's actually a rational route to power. It's not irrational. If your route to power is hold the line, give them nothing and take from them everything, right? King Leonidas 300, that's Republican strategy. And that's what they're doing. But the reason I don't think Democrats are doing the same is because Joe Biden right now is talking about working with Republicans. He's talking about working with Republicans at the expense of people like me who are to the far left. Now, there are plenty of people further left than me, plenty, but they definitely would consider me far left. And Joe Biden is saying, look, Republicans, we'll work with you. I don't want Medicare for all. I don't want the Green New Deal. I'm not going to put a ban on fracking. That's those ridiculous people over there hanging with Ben Dixon. We want to coordinate and triangulate and have bipartisanship with you, Mitch McConnell. So come, let us reason together. Republicans are like, thank you so much for bringing us to the table. Now, F you. Excuse me, but so I don't believe that there's an equivalence there. I believe that you have hardliners in the Republican Party and you have people in the Democratic Party who are constantly capitulating and triangulating with Republicans. Now, of course, you're going to have someone like Ben Shapiro say the exact same thing in the opposite direction, right? He's going to think Democrats are hardliners and he's going to think Republicans are too triangulating with Democrats. So they're opposites in, we're going to argue about that, but ultimately that's for you to decide. In terms of branding, I'll keep it quick. Democrats need to listen to their base, but they're not. With Joe Biden, they are going to try to create an environment of bipartisanship. And I think if Republicans were wise, they would take Joe Biden's olive branch, because he's constantly going to try to give them policies that everybody can look good on, that isn't too scary to moderate Republicans. He's going to constantly try to do that because that's the type of Democrat he is. I 100% disagree with it, but it is what it is. He's the president. He's president-elect. And in terms of getting the Senate, if he has any chance of accomplishing anything, he's going to have to probably go to the far right to get Mitch McConnell to agree. But when you have, from my best estimation, a party that is taking the stance of Leonidas in the movie 300, give them nothing and take from them everything, I think it's a fool's errand. And I think Joe Biden is going to be reminded every single week, week in, week out, that he's not going to be able to get anything from Republicans. And again, take all that with a grain of salt, because that's my political lens.
All right, we have at least one more question from the students. Again, please feel free to put your blue hand up. Ben, you mentioned a tweet that you had sent out that you wanted to check out. So I put that in the chat to everybody, and I thought, just as a quick interlude, do you have a theory of Twitter? A theory of what makes a tweet work for you? What you're looking for? The mix of sort of like way to goes versus like hate clicks, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a whole thing going on there. What do you think?
Did you put my most, I'm so embarrassed. You put my most recent tweet.
I hate to tell you, it's public, Ben. But yeah, you
It's
put
great.
the John. Look, I mean, look,
Yes.
what you said, right? It's a very clear sentiment
Yes.
that you're voting Ossoff, but you don't like Ossoff, right?
Not at all. And I am voting for him, and I'm gonna organize for him, and I'm gonna do my damnedest to make sure he's the next senator from the state of Georgia. But he needs to shut the hell up. And in terms of like what I believe on Twitter in terms of strategy, you know what helps? I want to be honest. What 100% helps is just don't give a damn what anybody has to say. Don't. I spent the first 3 years on Twitter, trying to craft the perfectly crafted sentence to not get canceled, to make sure that I dotted my I's, I crossed every T. I didn't have any typos because I Googled, and it was okay. It was cool. My point got through. It was a lot of work. And then one day, I don't know if what was influencing me, what substance was influencing me, but I just didn't give a damn anymore. And I just got tired of trying to appease people who never accepted me in the first place. Like, these are media. I didn't get people from the mainstream media to follow me until I didn't give a shit about them. I'll be honest with you, excuse my language. But once I stopped caring about what any of them thought about what I had to say, all of a sudden, all of them were following me. And I was like, you know what? Good. Because I like being free more than I like having them follow me. And if they want to unfollow me, fine. I'm surprised people like AOC still follows me, because I say some wild stuff on Twitter, but I only say what I believe. And I believe the role, here's my philosophy: not only say what I believe, not only give no regard to what anybody thinks about what I say, but also push the edges. I believe my job on Twitter, because I have nothing to lose, nobody pays my bills, nobody writes me a check except for the platforms that I make my money through. But there's no individual. YouTube writes my check, Facebook writes my check, my podcast writes my check, my patrons write my check. So there's no individual who can cancel me. So to that end, my role is to expand the Overton window. If there's a left, I'm there. I'm there, not always because I 100% believe in every dotted I and cross. No, but I believe that if we're going to ever triangulate properly to the center of America, then the left has to be represented. We can't have everybody in America saying, oh, I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm socially liberal. No, I'm fiscally a socialist. I'm fiscally, my friends are fiscally communists, and I want you to listen to me because they're coming to you with guillotines. And I want you to understand where I'm coming from, because if you don't listen to me as a socialist, they're going to come and get you as a communist. So it's not scare tactics, but it's representing the outer edge, because if the right is talking about fascism, and no, let me give you a better example. If the right is talking about, let's take police brutality, for example. If the right has police unions at the table, then I believe that people who want to defund the police should be at the table. Because how else can you actually triangulate what the center is unless you have both extremes? Right now, we have police unions at the table, but we don't have anybody at the table who's saying, no, we want to defund the police. You get those two people at the table, then I believe that you can get what the true center is. But for the longest in this country, we have only had the right, and this is, again, my political perspective, take it with a grain of salt, but I believe we've only had the right at the seat at the tables.
All right, so we've got some questions here from students. Andre, although you just kind of popped up, so you got a question, Andre?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Hey, Ben, thanks so much for coming.
Hey, pleasure.
What you just said about resonates with me about like the center, not the true center being not represented at all because of the right, the shift to the right. And I'm just wondering, like, given when you have such a large country and there are some like really substantial groups of people who believe totally different realities. Like there are people, like the people who want to defund the police, the people who like myself, who think that capitalism has like gone too far, the people who like are aware of systemic inequality and racial injustice. And that contrasts with people like who genuinely believe in QAnon. And in the middle, you have like regular liberals. How can we possibly reconcile that? And like I personally can hardly see groups like that ever coming to actually agree with each other. So I wonder what you think. How could we reconcile and be able to move forward? Like where do we go from here?
Ooh.
It's a hard question. Sorry.
It's not a hard question, only because I've thought about this at great length and I have an answer, but it's a little out in left field. So since you asked, I'm going to tell you. And again, Professor, I appreciate you giving me the chance. You probably, I don't know if you'll ever invite me back. Here's the truth, though. No, it's actually a good answer. I think it's relatively good. I think we have to understand that there are going to be multiple realities existing at the same time. Not all of them are true. I don't say this to draw an equivalence. QAnon is not true. And I'm sorry, I will argue to the death right now, right here. And I don't care. I don't care if I ever get an invitation back. There's truth and there's fiction. There's fact and there's fiction, right? And there's fact and there's opinion. And so I'm not saying this in regards of drawing a false equivalence between people who believe in QAnon and people who actually have common sense. There's a difference. But in democracy, it's, again, goes back to the democratization, the effects, the side effects of democratization. You get the opportunity to be free and explore your own truth. Some people's truth becomes these conspiracy theories that become an alternate universe. We're never going to be able to get rid of that. We're not. I think the future is a divided future where you're going to have multiple groups that are living multiple realities. QAnon and that type of train of thought, it's Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer. And I have to paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me. But he says, like, one of the problems that has plagued democracy is the fact that someone's ignorance can be equated to someone else's knowledge. But that was like, what, 50, 60 years ago he wrote that? I don't know. I'm just guessing. That problem existed then, that problem exists now, and that problem is going to always exist. So what do? I think we just have to have two different societies. I think we're going to have a society that is based in fact, that is based in science, that's based in scientific consensus, that's based in the best analysis that we can make objectively, because there's, opinions always come in. We're going to have to just let the wheat and the tare grow up together, to use a Bible phrase. We're going to have the lion and the lamb grow up together, because we can't get rid of them, and we're not going to let them get rid of us. If we try, if those of us who think we're correct try to get rid of them, it's not possible without becoming a monster. And so this might sound esoteric and like philosophical and lofty, but I think at the end of the day, we're just going to have two parallel systems. And this is not like two different countries. This is not two different, but in America, we will have a system of people. Case in point, you have those of us who believe the pandemic is real and those of us who don't. Those of us who believe it is real, we're doing our very best to isolate ourselves. Those of us who don't, we're still going to baseball games, or not baseball games, but to football games. We're still going to the club. We're still going to bars. And therein lies the separation. Now, notwithstanding, there are people who are stuck in the middle, who are essential workers, and we have to do what we can for essential workers. But those of us who have a choice, we're staying home, we're isolating, we're self-quarantining. Those of us who don't believe it, we're just going out and living our lives. And I think that's the best example of the two realities existing at the same time.
All right, Ben. So I don't want to have this go too far, maybe 10 or so more minutes. I've got a question somebody sent to me on chat, and then Madison, you have a question, and then maybe we can get one more in after that. I posted into the chat Ben's YouTube page, his Twitter, his Facebook. You can see where he is doing his work. Andre was nice enough to post in the quote, which you got pretty much right, Ben. So good work there. That's in the chat there, the Asimov quote. The question I got here in the chat is directly about the race in Georgia, which of course has major national implications.
Yes.
What kind of messages, what sort of messaging do you think Ossoff and Reverend Warnock should champion in their runoff races as they try to turn those seats in Georgia towards the Democrats?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. Talk about what people need. You know what people are like, just in general, people are just tired of politicians as usual, right? They're tired of the colloquialisms. They're tired of the platitudes. They're tired of the generic empty suit guys who just make promises, or guys, women, non-gender conforming individuals who make these promises of better days, a brighter tomorrow, build back better. Nobody, that doesn't resonate with anybody in Georgia. In Georgia, the people who gave Joe Biden the victory, I don't have the sheet with me, but it's on my Twitter timeline. And you could see, number one, it's all young people in general gave Joe Biden the margin that is turning, because it's not finalized, but it's turned Georgia relatively blue. But the main group, right? You had white people between the ages of 18 to 29, it was kind of split evenly. You had young people in general between the ages of 18 to 29. They were like 50 or 60% for Joe Biden, which is excellent. But Black youth between the ages of 18 and 29 voted for Joe Biden at 90%. I know the organizations that were on the ground registering people, they were progressive organizations. They were organizations who were out protesting saying defund the police. The general thinking of the Democratic Party is still a 1992 Bill Clinton strategy, which is appeal to moderate Republicans. Republicans have evolved since 1992, and they would literally, again, this is my political filter, toss it out as you need to. They would literally rather die and go to these pandemic meetings with Donald Trump, where they estimated 30,000 people contracted COVID-19, 700 people died from all of his rallies that are super spreader events. If Democrats are still running a 1992 strategy, and Republicans have gone to the point where they're like, I don't care what you give us. You could give us total capitalism and not a single, you could get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, get rid of SNAP benefits. We don't care. We're never going to vote for you, Joe Biden. Then what does that tell you? Stop trying to use the 1992 Bill Clinton appealing to moderate Republicans, because they are not voting for you. More Republicans voted for Donald Trump in 2020 than in 2016. So if Democrats come to Georgia trying to appeal to moderate Republicans, it's a fool's errand. They're going to lose. They need to appeal to the people who put them in power, young people who want Medicare for all, who want a Green New Deal, Black people who voted for Joe Biden at a 90% clip, right? Who want Medicare for all, who want the Green New Deal. And oh, by the way, it might be a 60-40 split. Some want to reform the police, but that 40% want to defund the police, right? There's far more radical than the Jim Clyburns and Nancy Pelosi's of the world. And we have the data to really show that in Georgia. So don't come to Georgia thinking you're going to convert Republicans, because you're not. Come to Georgia and talk to the people who helped Joe Biden win, which were young people of every race, specifically young Black people.
Thanks for that, Ben. I think we'll have this be the last question, unless you want to hang around for a minute after, Ben.
I'm not in a rush. You're good to go. So
yeah.
If you have any more questions, I can stay. If not, we'll call it.
Yeah, let's do this then. Let's have one last question, and then we'll keep the Zoom on, and we'll see if people want. But if people want to feel like they've done the whole show and get off of Zoom for the day, I totally get that too. So Madison, if you'd like to end us here in terms of the official program.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You sort of touched on this already with just what you're saying about how like different media outlets receive you on Twitter and everything. But I was just wondering what strategies you use to hold discussions with conservatives who disagree with you, or especially people who just kind of refuse to listen to factual information.
Yeah. So that's the caveat right there. Like, factual information has to be the foundation. There has to be a baseline of truth. If I find I'm in a conversation with someone who is willing to reject the baseline of truth, of fact, especially scientific fact, then I save my energy. Because if we can't agree that the sky is blue, for whatever reasons, that the grass is green, then we're really wasting our time. And we need to conserve our energy and convince those who can be convinced. I have found libertarians are they engage in more good faith than conservatives in general, in my experience. That may not be true across the board. But in my experience, I found that libertarians at least try to have a baseline of fact. And then if we have a different interpretation of those facts, we can sit down and we can argue, and we can go back and forth. We can have a dialectic, and then maybe they'll say something that will change my mind. But I'm really interested in seeing if I can say something that will that they will change their mind. And so long as we have a conversation where we're both willing to change our mind with new information, then all I'll say is have the conversation. It's a conversation that's worth having. But if you find yourself engaging with someone who wants to change the information before they change their mind, walk away and go find someone else to talk to, because you're wasting your time.
Definitely. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right. Let's wrap up our official program. Ben, thanks for coming back
pleasure,
4 years
man.
later and giving us your perspective. It's great to see you grow
Thank you,
as a media creator. I've posted into everybody their Ben's his YouTube, his Twitter. You can find him on there. Ben is very responsive. If you're interested in the world of independent media, political media, progressive media, Ben is a great guy to know. So I encourage you to reach out to him on Twitter. He's there, as you know, and we'll be following you. I mean, on the one hand, it's exciting to see how this Georgia Senate races play out for a number of reasons. But I'm very much looking forward to seeing your perspectives as this takes
Professor,
stage.
Can I say this? I just want to say it to the class. It's a college course, so maybe they don't care, but I just want to say Professor Sinkowitz has been one of the truest friends that I have had since I met him, since day one. He has always offered me sound, reasoned advice, measured advice. He's been able to walk me back from the edge occasionally, and I really appreciate his friendship and his guidance. So I just want to put that on the record as well.
No, that's very kind, Ben. So everyone, let's give Ben another round of applause. Ben, thank you so much. Great stuff, really fascinating, and it's wonderful to see you develop and put out your ideas and have people hear them. I'll leave the Zoom on, and people can kind of just go off of if you want to talk, we can just go off of mute and kind of like you can work it out that way. I'm going to turn my camera off for a minute so I can do some things in here. But if you want to talk to Ben, just he's there for a few minutes.
I hang out for a couple minutes and while I fix something over here. If not, hey, listen, folks, if not, feel free to click that end button and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, that's also true too. Yeah, no pressure at all.
No pressure at all. Because my kids have to have dinner. I got to fix dinner for the kids at some point, I can be more than happy to answer a question.
My 4-year-old's calling as well. Very important.
Is he's literally calling you?
Yeah. Well, it looks like it's from my wife, but it is always.
You know it is.
Yeah. No, I know it is Leon. So yeah, does anybody here want to?
I'm totally not embarrassed that everyone dropped off because I expect.
No, we told them to. Look. 45 minutes, end of the day is a long time.
Trust me, I know. In this medium. I'm cool. It's cool.
The good thing is that this is your medium, essentially.
Oh, listen, I spend so many hours doing this, man. It is amazing. This is COVID-19 and the isolation, not COVID-19, but the isolation that it required has been probably the biggest benefit to everything. Keep me from like just wasting time out.
Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah. So it's sort of in your line of work because it's inside staring at a computer screen anyway.
Right.
It imposes discipline on you.
Yeah. It's like you're in the house, you're not going out and wasting gas, sitting in traffic. So get even more work done. So
right, because you're not supposed to be. Yeah, Diego.
Yeah,
I just have a question now that we're talking about time management during the whole COVID era. How do you balance between like your podcast, social media? Like, how do you go about your work?
Well, it's a little challenge. It is challenging right now, and I'm glad you asked that because I'm going to share this video with my patrons, and I just put them up on I just announced to them a significant change, and the change is that the nighttime stream that I do every night is now going to double for my podcast, because what I have been doing for the last 2 months, I do a morning show with some friends. And it's a kind of a fun, loose, but really politically heavy show. Then I did my podcast right after that. And then I did individual videos about breaking news throughout the day. And then I did a nighttime stream. And I was doing that every single day. And I found that the podcast started to lack. Like if there was something that I gave up because I needed to sleep, it was the podcast. But then I realized I'm doing all of this content. People are going to consume that content however is best for them. And so I decided to double the nighttime stream and then publish it like 8 o'clock in the morning. So it is to be efficient. it is to make sure that I can be consistent and to not overwork myself, because I actually, at this juncture, we're doing so well on YouTube and Facebook in terms of videos that I'm trying to open it up to other people to work with me on my platform, putting out similar content, but in their voice, using their talent. And so I'm moving more away from being the all-inclusive talent on my channel to, you know, being far more efficient with my time and then creating opportunities for other people to create talent.
Yeah, no, you're a busy man. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's my pleasure. My pleasure. Cool, cool. All
I talked to Leon.
right. Everything okay? Did he? Hey, my 2-year-old, he's getting ready to turn 3. His new thing is telling me to get out of his house.
Ah.
and I'm like, I'm somewhere between like, oh, that is so cute, and also like, oh, wait a minute, let me get you straight right now, little boy, because this is my house. This is me and mommy's house. And now he knows it's a good, funny point for us to have a fake argument. And he'll just come to me in the morning and say, my house. And I'm like, okay, I'll entertain it, because he understands that's a good way for us to interact in a very sarcastic way at 2 years old. So
yeah, they come. They
learn a lot faster than we did, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Leon was calling to say that he wiped himself at school today and therefore deserves a prize. Which, I mean, as you know, that's a big deal when they are like fully.
It really is.
That's
except the fact that you're gonna have to check him when he gets home.
No, this is true. Look, there's further, like, it's not a one-stop shop, but he has earned his prize. He wants like, you know, those like scoop ball, like it's little like it's like a scoop that you throw a ball with. You like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
those are popular.
I am now ordering that in recognition of his grand achievement. Drinking. Anne, I just maybe I'll take a moment to introduce you. Anne Sears is on the call. She teaches a number of courses, including on news media and political media. So just to introduce you to Ben there.
Hi, Professor.
And if you're interested in seeing some of Ben's stuff for your class or whatever, let me know. You know, we can talk about that.
And listen, the negative thing about my appearance on Twitter is that I'm really far more reasonable than my Twitter presence will suggest. You know, and it's not that I'm being phony on Twitter. It's that I just let it loose. If I'm angry, I allow myself to be angry. But at the end of the day, I do know that we're going to have to sit at the table with somebody and make some negotiations with people. So I am far more reasonable than I appear on Twitter, just as a disclaimer. This is probably why so AOC follows me, and I reached out to her. I'm like, come on the show. And she was like, sure, I'd love to. Here's my assistant. And then the assistant never replied. I'm like, you know what?
She went through the tweets. Yeah.
She went through the tweets and saw how out of pocket I get sometimes. So
yeah. Well, I mean, look, would she have any idea who you were? Were you not willing to push?
That's true.
Some boundaries, right? I mean, that's this sort of fine line.
It's the give and take. It's the give and take. So
no, that's right. And to grow, you know, I mean, look, yeah, I think, you know, if you believe you're being honest, then it's just a matter of presentation. Then that's what that medium's about, right? That medium is about.
In about 10 years, Professor, I will blame it on being young. In 10 years, sure. I'll blame it on being young.
And then 10 years after that too.
Yeah, exactly. So,
all right. I think I'm going to let you get back to the kids, Ben.
That's good for me. Take care. Professor, thank you so much for having me. And everyone who's here now, thank you. And give the class my best. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.